Why, hello. I'd like to welcome you to my video for Dragon Week, an event that Pointy Hat and Ginny D are doing to where a bunch of TTRPG content creators are creating videos for a monster that they do at least seemingly yearly. This year we have dragons, and while Pointy Hat and Ginny D generally relate to 5e, this will be for Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and I will be introducing great buffs that you could do to various dragons that we have rules for in Pathfinder 2e to make them a bit more impactful and have their actions be far more interactive with a player. I will give you a loose explanation, but if you want, you can read through this in the PDF that will be free for anyone to access to in the description, which you can find on Pathfinder Infinite. The main basis is Fabled Actions are very powerful things that various monsters get access to. They always come in two forms that are linked to each other, a preparation and an activation. They have to spend a preparation and then get to activate it during their next turn, as long as it is not counteracted or otherwise negated. These Fabled Actions are related to a part of the monster, so they could be attacked and possibly destroyed, causing people to be able to deal reduced damage to the monster, but counteract some of its powerful actions. For the purposes of AoEs, it's either the part or the monster, not both. But if you were to have an effect that allow you to hit multiple targets, such as making multiple strikes, or something like Force Barrage, where you shoot at several separate targets, you can choose to split that between the main body and the part. Any damage dealt to the part goes half to the main body, and when a part becomes broken, the main body loses a decent chunk of HP. These parts need to be dealt with swiftly as they have regeneration, and this will heal them up as they go through. But when a part becomes broken, the bonuses they get for priming it go away. And while this is the easiest method, there will be other methods to how you could stop it. And this is merely suggestions, as whatever the party might have thematically to try and counteract something is up to them. Also, counteracting, while would stop it outright, occasionally the DC might be too high because you're fighting a more powerful enemy than you. So I offer instead the ability to attempt to give benefits against resisting the effects of it. The DC -2 if they want to give it to them and all of their allies, or -5 if they're willing to not benefit from it themselves or to only benefit for it by themselves, which for some people would be beneficial, for others perhaps making it so the rest of the party can be benefited rather than you would be more beneficial. The basis is you have some DC. This would be the DC disable. It would reduce by 2 if they want to provide the bonus, which is +2 circumstance, +4 critical to the entire party, or a DC 15 if they would want to apply it to everyone except the champion, as we have this scenario where the dragon charges up its breath weapon and the champion, or our fill-in for paladin, tries to hold their shield to the dragon's mouth to stop it from being able to harm the rest of the party. The first Fabled Action I have is a Frightful Roar, which has them prepare a roar. This is pretty much a supplement instead of dealing with the Terrifying Presence and making it a thing that the dragon can come back to and repeatedly use to debilitate the foes. However, it has a smaller range to it and is possibly more avoidable than it would otherwise be. So first you have the Prepare Roar, which has to be done first, and as some do, gives them a benefit for preparing it. And it also mentions the Disable. These obviously are suggestions, but you could have a bard or whomever really perform to drown out the audio of the roar, simply making a louder nuisance to it. And athletics to keep its mouth shut, or perhaps scaring the dragon could stop it from putting its heart into the roar. The activation action comes in various forms. For this, I have spelt out for the levels. Particularly, these are related to dragons of these levels. having the Flame Drake, the Young Cloud Dragon, and the Shoal Lenorm. But as you can see, main basis is after it is primed, all activations require that they be primed. I'm mainly just stating that on this one, so it's known, but it won't necessarily show up on all of them. The dragon lets out a fearsome roar, creating an emanation around it, forcing a will save against some small sonic damage, but also applies a frighten effect to him. And while the emanation and damage and DC increase, as do the abilities to resist continual uses of the Dragon Roar. Because at the start, if you critically succeed, you become temporary immune, or if you succeed, you get a bonus to future saves. Whereas the later you get, you no longer gain immunity, and the bonus gets smaller, to where eventually you need a critical success to even get a bonus against resisting it for later, more powerful dragons. Now, to go to a part, we have the Flame Drake's Maw, as I was mentioning. They are for these various levels. They tell you the stats of the thing. This has explanations on how I determine the stats for parts, but you can use these maths if you were to use for the respective things, and we will have other parts that have similar stats. The break cost is how much they lose if it loses the HP and goes into its broken threshold. Their AC is generally different than the other. The regeneration only applies to the part and won't repair it if it's broken, unless it is primed, which is mentioned before. I give just about every part a weakness of some sort, mainly to give it some upside for them to locate these, because personally, I wouldn't have the player knowing every single part and would need to make recall knowledge checks or something similar to realize that there are specific parts on this monster that they can attack. While the part is broken, there is a penalty, which for this hinders their Jaws attack and reduces its damage if the part gets destroyed. The activation can be used if it's broken, and neither can be used if it ends up getting destroyed. So, destroying the part outright could negate the ability for it to roar and would have the party wail into this part of the body repeatedly and aggressively. Similar thing for Young Cloud Dragon, just a different weakness for it, and different things because its jaw does different damage, but the penalty stays the same. I use item penalty for parts because it is a rare penalty, and I wouldn't want to penalize builds that use Demoralize or some other status penalty frequently, or if there happens to be a build that can easily inflict a suppressed condition, or if we were to give a penalty to their AC, the off guard condition. So instead, I use item penalties for this. The breath weapon, for this, I'll do basics because later on we'll go into detail, but it prepares it, and then it can either as one action or two action use the breath. If it spends two actions, it gets to stride or fly, and during any point of its movement can breath weapon, allowing it a lot of alteration how it works. Give a brief check. This dragon prepares its breath weapon, and the party here is like, alright, well, we don't want to all get caught by this, so this person runs to here, this person runs to here, and they run to stand somewhere here, getting a bit out of the way. The wizard knows they're way too low, they gotta get out and hide well behind back here. Your ranger or whatever is up here continuing to blink them, and makes a couple more attacks and just stays far away. This dragon, as a young cloud dragon, would have a 40-foot cone, so if it were to one action, it couldn't really hit much, but if it were to two action, it would get the ability to fly with their impressive fly speeds, and could fly to somewhere around, I believe, here, and its breath weapon would hit 2 here. It might be able to hit more if it were to breathe on this note. Yeah, you could use its breath weapon here and catch all 3 of these, while it continues to fly up and deal with a ranger that is continuously shooting it with range attacks. Which normally in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, you can't break up movement. So this offers the big strength that it gets to place its AoEs while maintaining good positioning. Most Fable activations, you could just keep looping them. You'd be able to use it every even turn. But for Breath Weapon and things that need a recharge, you need to wait number of rounds. It is literally just going to be whatever number of rounds it needs to wait to use the Breath Weapon again. And that's before they can unleash. They could, before the round just before they regain the ability to unleash, prepare it. So they can set to use it still at the same rate. Slightly. Next, I have for general is regenerative scales, giving dragons the ability to heal themselves. This one has a bit different effects to how to disable it, and can show that you can very much mess with how you want the fabled actions to be disabled. And this one has the dragon stride or fly. I didn't mention it before, but prepare breath does nothing but prepare. But this one has them gain the ability to move and then primes. The main thing to note is if you trigger the weakness, which could either be weaknesses that the monster has outright or is a weakness of its part. If you do void damage and it would be healed by vitality effects, gets disrupted. If they have void healing instead of vitality damage, these are rare conditions. So I want to incentivize them to some degree. And very especially because this is a magical effect, using your own knowledge of magic, you can tamper with it. So you would have situations to where the dragon perhaps is the arcane tradition, so it would have Arcana be the relevant skill, and you would make an Arcana check against it to try and counteract and deal with it. This would be very hard, or DC plus 5 of the spell rank you're going for, and reduces the spell rank of the spell when it unleashes, which either does as a free action or one action. Free action gets the healer harm, whatever would heal it, against itself. As single action, for one action, it gets the bonuses for 2 actions. And heals people around it, including it within a range, depending on the size of the dragon. And very specially, dragons can forgo using spell slots to instead become drained, or increase or drained. If it does so, the spell rank is their level divided by 4, rounding down. They don't lose current HP from this way, but all of their downsides. So for a Flame Drake, it would only have first rank. For a young Cloud Dragon, it would go to second rank, making the ability to counteract using this far easier if it wants to use the drained ability to work around it. You have scales for this, very similar thing. The special tells you what their counteracting is, but that will be the main notes on that. Next, we will go to specific dragons and a bit more detail on specific breath weapons. The first special one we'll go over is Copper Dragon. Namely, their breath weapon will work a bit differently, as Copper Dragons have access to a slowing breath, a slowing gas. And they will have to choose which they're priming ahead of time, and can't really change the decision after the fact. So it is a slight nerf there, but as a bit of upside, I made it so they can use it a bit more frequently. Normally, it would be 1d4 rounds, and while yes, a base of 1d4 plus 1 rounds is a bit higher, rather than only reducing by crits, you can also simply hit with 2 attacks in a single turn, which Twisting Tail can assist in. Creatures that fail their saves against a spell or another Fabled Activation action will reduce it even further, allowing you to very easily upkeep the ability to use your breath over and over in a relatively fluid manner as the players suffer against the dragon's mighty powers. Um, I did change the slowing breath to instead be a cone, and instead of just save or nothing, it's fatigue on success, critical success for nothing as is usual, and keeps us fatigued as a concept, which really helps you keep consistently hitting these attacks by applying a status penalty. As well, yes, slowing them down is a cool mechanic to mess around with. I believe having too dominant of action denial can be really burdensome. So instead, I come with using fatigued as like a fill-in. We have the various rules as well as the sizes. The line is the exact line that it would be for these levels of dragon, and the cone is just a bit cut off from that. DC is the same. Dissolving breath or the acid damaging breath is the same. I did think of piercing as a weakness for the Maw, mainly because I like the narrative concept that copper dragons, as metallic as they are, find weakness to things like pickaxes and the sort. So I think it would be really interesting to play with this as like a subtle theming to them. Perhaps, their entire body isn't as fragile, but certain parts of them could be. While this doesn't exist, this is something that can be a cool kind of interaction, is more a fabled action that other monsters might want to mess with, and just like a concept you can think about of Prime Claw Shred, of has them grapple a creature if successfully grappling them. The escape DC to escape its grapples becomes hard. This isn't just for this, and can be any other grapples it might have. The ways to get out of it, if it's not grabbing anyone, that's mainly because it needs to have someone grab to activate it. Or if someone were to critically hit it, staggering it a bit, or it critical fails something, a creature that isn't being grabbed frightens it, they pull their attention away from the things that are holding on to it. The Unleash has to make 2 claw attacks. They combine the damage. Map normally applies, but if the first attack misses, the second attack doesn't worry about it. If the creature is restrained, then it can make its bite or jaws attack instead of one of the claw attacks, giving it a really powerful attack. However, it will always release a creature that is grappled. Notably, they will be off guard to this if they're grappled, so it gets all of the benefits for that. As you can see with the claws versus the Maw, the claws have a lower HP total and lower weaknesses and things of that nature. Penalty, as such, is a bit smaller on the base, and only really when it's destroyed do you get the big thing. The grapple details tell you their bonus, their athletic checks, and the DC to escape it, but this is just assuring you to have the information when you need it, and once again, is for the level of Copper Dragons we have. For Diabolic, which I'm using as a fill-in for Red Dragon, just because there's not really anything all too special with Red Dragons in Legacy. Whereas Copper Dragon, I don't fully know if there's a dragon that has alternating breath weapons that they can use. So for them, their Prepare Breath doesn't really interact in any special way. Their Unleash Breath, however, has a special thing that they gain access to called Continue Exhale. So where they breathe out even more, and doesn't necessarily need to be exactly where they put their breath weapon at all, and has them create a hazard on the ground for 3 full rounds. The cone is then powerful and forces creatures that start their turn in there to make a basic fortitude as the heat of the environment harms them drastically. Same concept that they can reduce the number of turns they need to wait by actively engaging. Parts we have here, I thought it would be cool to make it so the Diabolic Dragons, which are normally weak to Holy, their Maw could be hit with Vitality, which often is like a fill-in for positive and Holy attacks if you don't have a Sanctification on you. Same concept as the other Maw. When it breaks, gets an item penalty to attack. When it's destroyed, damage gets reduced. These cones are the same. Initial DC the same. The Continue X hails roughly a fourth damage, somewhere around there. And the DC is lowered by 2 or an easy DC. That is all set up on here. For Diabolic Dragon, instead of a Claw Shred, something that I think narratively is really cool to play around with is a Claw Drag. Same thing as Claw Shred. They grapple with priming, and to get out of it, you can escape, have everyone escape the grapple, critical hit them, etc. But they have a very different Claw Shred, to where they drag them against the ground and brutally force the creature to endure as it shreds about the ground, being able to place it somewhere from the place of its end. If it succeeds, the creature being grabbed or restrained chooses. If it fails a save, the Diabolic Dragon chooses. I put bludgeoning in as like a weakness of, oh, they have very thin claws. Perhaps you could bash them in with a hammer and crush them. But again, shows you the athletics check, the DC. This has the damage. It is roughly just the damage of their claws. As you can see for this, roughly just the damage of their claws. DC is a fair bit lower than your usual stuff, but it is still relatively high. And then the final thing I have for special is Lenorms. Lenorms are a very unique kind of monster, mainly because they have a really powerful narrative thing to them. So these Lenorms have a curse that when someone kills them, they have to make a big save against a curse or take a really big downside. So I was like, all right, we're gonna play with that and make it so it can actively curse people. The effects will be reduced, but are still relatively impactful. They prime, becoming glistening until the start of the next turn, and primes their flesh curse until the end of the next turn. While glistening, it heals double its regeneration, but glistening ends if it takes damage. So if you don't damage it, it'll heal. However, in order to activate its curse, someone has to hurt it. If a creature hasn't damaged it since the start of its last turn, it can't use Unleash Flesh Curse on anyone. So there's a relatively easy way to dodge it, but you can also counteract their primal magics or use Divine against a creature to disable their scales. However, it is relatively harsh to tampering. If you fail, you do a single point of damage, and if you critically fail, it ends up stupefying you. So if you fail your check, there's a big downside that you do 1 damage. Well, yes, disabling its glistening allows its curse to work against you. Each kind of path for the Lenorm has its own curse. These are relatively in the same theme, or at least narrative, of the curse that they have when slain. But I'm not going to go into these all in big detail, because there's a lot to them. They change a fair bit. The main thing I would note is we only have 2 versions, either the adult, ancient, whatever this might be, and young. Young is a fill-in for everything else, and as such, the young is a set and determines its weaknesses by its lineage, which is just whatever is like applicable here. So all of these are weak to precision. They have vital organs that you cut into, and as such can damage severely. For Crags, as they are rocky, bludgeoning, cold, because they're also a bit fire, they will trigger the weakness here. For Shoal, I have slashing and void damage. For yada yada. The main note is when they're scales, they take persistent damage until it repairs itself, and the DC for the venom drops a bit, as well as the damage. While it's destroyed, it becomes encumbered, and the DC drops even more. Shows you the curse, DC, and duration, as well as on the scales for respective levels. I think using encumbered for major body parts like scales, turtle shells, and things of that nature, is a good way to show that it has broken armor on it and isn't going to be able to fight in the same way. So all these scales use that kind of methodology for their own special thing. But that is the main stuff I have for these. If you want, you can browse through these. If you have any major questions on it, I'll be more than happy to answer in the comments, any questions in the comments. And I hope that you enjoy my video about Fabled Dragons and all other videos that happen in Dragon Week. And I'm really happy to be allowed to participate in this open event. And I think it would be really cool if Pathfinder 2nd Edition creators join in, and any other TT RPG players of any degree really join in to some degree.